Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Christensen. This is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, celebrating classic horror throughout history with new episodes every Friday night. Tonight we're going to be talking about Calvaire from 2004, also known as The Ordeal, written and directed by Belgian filmmaker Fabrice du Welz. It's streaming now on Shudder, so if you haven't seen it already, please check it out. And I hope you enjoy our conversation as we dive deep under the skin of this deeply challenging and uncomfortable and ultimately rewarding horror feature. And it's a holiday film, so that's why we're dropping it in right now, post-Christmas. Hope you enjoy our conversation, and we'll see you next year. As one of our favorite panelists, Katie Glidewell, aka the Blonde in Front, said, nothing says the holidays like Calvaire. We have an awesome panel to chat about this completely offbeat, off-brand holiday favorite. Let's bring everybody in and let's say hello to Ashley Lamers.
Hello.
John McDevitt.
Hey everybody, good to see ya.
Katie Glidewell, aka the Blonde in Front.
Hi.
And Dominic Conti.
Hi everyone, happy to be here.
And we are going to be chatting about Calvaire 2004, celebrating its 20th anniversary. Thanks for coming on the show, everybody, and welcome. This is one of my holiday favorites that I love to trot out for folks. John, let's go ahead and kick things off with you. Where did you come by Fabrice du Welz's masterpiece?
That's a good question. I don't remember exactly, but it had to have been one of two things. I did a deep dive into new French extremity films a few different times. And I've also done some deep dives into holiday horror films. And that's like, you know, the perfect intersection of that Venn diagram. And was just completely stunned by it. Easily one of the most unsettling Christmas movies ever made.
Perfect. Yep. Katie, let's bounce to you.
So I only was made aware of this film, I think 1 year ago. I actually was out with friends before we went to the music box, and they were talking about it. And we were talking about New French Extremity. And my line for that is like, you always know it's New French because no one wins. Even if you survive, no one wins. And Calvaire is very much in the vein of that. It's definitely no different. It piqued my interest when they talked to me. They were discussing something about the dance scene in it, and I was like, they said it was new on Shudder, so I was like, all right, I have to check this out. And then I did, and I was like, what did my brain not unsee now? Like, that is okay, we're gonna discuss this, and I'm so glad we're discussing this because this is just one of those like, what?
Yeah, this is not so much a discussion as an encounter group for those who have experienced Calvaire. Dominic, how about you?
You know, like Katie, I've only seen this. I'd seen this just a couple of years ago, and it was just a recommendation from a friend, a serious horror fan, and she kept bringing it up, and I said, "Oh yeah, sure, we'll get at it." And then when I finally did watch it, I was just so happy I did. But yeah, I was knocked back several paces.
And Ashley, how about you?
I think I saw it maybe 2009. Someone I was dating showed me that movie, and I think kind of the same thing as other people have been saying about watching some of the French extremity movies, where I was like, well, I'm super into these other ones, so I'm going to watch Calvaire. And I watched it and I was like, I don't know what I think. So rewatching it for this has been a whole new experience.
Yeah. And it bears mentioning that even though it is spoken French, It is a Belgian production. Fabrice du Welz is a Belgian filmmaker, and I had the good fortune to meet him at the Brussels International Fantastic Film Festival back in 2012, where they were screening Calvaire. And so I had the good fortune to not only meet him, but also see it on the big screen. And it holds up then, it holds up now. I remember, similar to other folks' stories, is kind of like watching it and not really knowing what you're in for. But I don't think anybody can really prepare you for this movie, because it isn't like the other French extremity films, which are in fact extreme. We're talking about things like Martyrs, High Tension, Frontiers, Inside. And this kind of falls somewhere in there. It's certainly toward the earlier stages of that movement. But I think it does get grouped in with those. But I don't actually think of it in that vein. And it wasn't until I was reading about it in prep for this, I was like, oh, I guess it does kind of fit into that umbrella of the new wave French horror. But mostly it just feels like such its own thing, while at the same time clearly showing, its fingerprints of other horror films that had come before. John, if you don't mind kind of kicking us off.
Yeah, the premise of the film is there is someone named Marc who is a professional singer who is sort of on his own mini tour with not very prestigious holiday gigs, like at a long-term care facility. And he is just driving through the wilderness to his next show, and his car breaks down. He is led to an inn run by somebody named Bartel, and it becomes clear very quickly that Bartel is not really there to help Marc, but really wants him to stay.
And let me just throw up our spoilers banner, because I think this will be one that may not be familiar to viewers. I hope everybody is intrigued enough to check it out. But we will be talking some spoilers now, because this is the kind of film you want to dig a little deeper into. What I love about Marc Stevens, who's played by Laurent Lucas, is that he's such a kind of a lower tier entertainer. Like, he's driving around in his van. I love that his banner comes in two pieces. It's Marc Stevens. He can't even get like a banner that just runs the whole thing together. And having done my fair share of van and bus tours before, like, this is very familiar. I absolutely related to Marc in that regard. I'm like, yeah, you're just kind of schlepping it to the next gig, and like, Christmas is a good time for you because a lot of people are looking for that affordable entertainment. But I love that he's been coming around to these places often enough that he's a familiar face. Like, they love it when Marc comes and does his holiday concert.
Yeah, he's got a real magnetism too, where no matter who he sings to, they are in love with him.
Yeah, indeed.
I got kind of a Doom Generation feel for it, that everyone who encounters him just immediately becomes infatuated with him.
Yeah.
And I never realized, I never put that together before, because it's like, oh, this is very much like Rose McGowan's character in Doom Generation, where they're just like attracted to her, but yet there's also some sort of like creepiness to it too. And I'm like, that's interesting. Okay, yeah.
But he continually stands alone. He doesn't join up with any of these people, either singly or in their communities. You get why in some instances, but in other instances, it's a little grayer as to why he isn't interested.
There does seem to be a loneliness to his character, or at least, many of us living his life might feel lonely in that circumstance. And it also is like this series of episodes of these people who just find him magnetic, who are infatuated with him, crossing boundaries in a way that is so uncomfortable. A lot of desperate characters who are kind of yearning for a sexual connection, and they look to Marc for it and have no regard for Marc's boundaries.
There's so much loneliness throughout this movie. Like, this whole movie is just populated with people who don't have human connection, who don't have healthy relationships in their community. They don't have a community, although that's not entirely true. There is a community of sorts, but I don't know if it's necessarily one that anybody wants to sign up for.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else got the feeling for this, but again, watching the second time, especially with the fog and stuff, I never put together that it's sort of the area that Mark ends up in is this very incestual, misogynistic bestiality brigadoon.
Oh,
where
nice.
It seems like, I mean, because it's like when he gets to this area and he sees Bartel, and Bartel like looks at the phone that he has, and I know that it's 2004, so this is kind of a newer concept, but it just seems like so many of the gentlemen in that area just don't understand like what's going on like in the outside world. And then when you get to a certain point closer to the end and they like, you know, certain people won't go through the fog, I was like, oh, this is very much like, this is kind of like a very creepy brigadoon. Growing up in the 80s and stuff like that, so many concepts of like kidnapping, you know, sexual assault, just the weird dancing people and stuff. And then the cornerstone, quicksand. I was like, you know what? I feel like I can relate to these people who wrote this. Like, yeah, there's not a lot of quicksand that we see later on, especially in the millennium. And I'm like, good for you guys. All right.
Yeah, it definitely does feel like a callback.
The world around him is trying to draw him in.
Well, and as a performer, and Dominic, you definitely know this, Katie, the idea, John actually as well, right? I mean, it's that idea of you become what the other person needs you to be for a limited amount of time, you know, and on your terms. For the time that I'm on stage, I will make love to you with my song.
Yeah.
And he's very good at it and does connect with people. But then the show is over. It's not authentic. There's a kind of a hollowness to him.
Yeah.
And that feels by choice, you know, like I feel like he's one of those alone but not lonely folks.
Yeah.
And his performances, especially with his gesticulations during the performance, it's very corny. It's very artificial in terms of like the way he's conveying emotion with his body. And yet people are so entranced by it.
Well, you have to wonder if a more sophisticated audience wouldn't be as entranced, because he's also, I mean, he's a lower tier performer, but also performing to a lower tier audience, you know, that really is engaged by this, you know, the community that loves its community theater.
They get heavy into the Christ-like imagery later on in the show, of course, and then you when you hark back and you see that the filmmaker is really pushing, like early on, the idea that he is separate and if not equal, then above some of these other people. He's Christ-like right from the jump. But I guess I still struggle against that. You know, my mind always goes to, you know, like the cult-like circumstances of the community around him, and everyone trying to bring him in, and him understandably not wanting to be a part of those things. You know, like I hadn't thought of that, AC. That's really interesting. You know, about the quicksand trying to grab at him too. What is the singular nature of this? He's kind of like a cipher in a little bit. He's what other people want to make of him. And he's
and literally, you know, like when Bartel, I mean, decides to make him his long lost love with Gloria, and it's so obvious that he is not that. You know, like he is not feminine. He's asexual, if anything, but Bartel is intent on making him into what he wants him to be.
Another interesting creative choice that I think kind of complicates the messaging of the movie and the imagery of the movie just a little bit is that it opens with a sequence of Mark applying makeup for his performance, which could be seen as something conventionally feminine. I don't know that that's something, because when I watched it again for this episode, it was only my second time seeing it, and I didn't remember that the film opened with that sequence.
Yeah, nor had I. I feel like every time I revisit this film, it's for the first time, because the journey, like by the time you get to the end, it's really hard to tap back into what happened at the beginning, because you've gone on such a journey and you are left out in the marsh. And I found something interesting. I know that there have been people who've compared this to Texas Chainsaw, and I think there are definitely some parallels to be drawn. You know, we have a singular character who's trying to last through the night, and the entire family is against him. You know, he escapes at the end and is on the run and being pursued. But something that happens in this film, as opposed to what happens to Sally in Texas Chainsaw is when Sally gets in the truck, we go with her.
Mm-hmm.
In this one, Mark watches Phillipe Nahon's character sink below the quicksand, and then the camera leaves him. And we never know what becomes of Mark.
And,
He's
yeah, by extension, we leave him too.
Correct. We disconnect. The unhealthy relationship is over.
Well, and that scene is so interesting in itself because one, Mark has walked through that entire marsh, and you see that as you're talking about the crucifixion and the Christ-like character, it's like he's walking on water. He had no issues. And then this man who's been after him, like, you know, for a good day sinks when this man is pleading for his life. Mark doesn't help him, but he does like ease his soul, like saying, it's like, can you at least tell me you love me? And he does. And it's like an act of kindness, just like you're going to die. So I'm just going to give you this, when he could have grabbed the shotgun, gone full violence, but he didn't. And that I thought was a very interesting take on that it's like after everything we've seen and the violence that he's endured, it's like to give this man this peace while he's dying.
Forgiveness.
Yeah. It's like almost shocking to me that it's like, especially with the conversation between Mark and Bartel, that they meant to have that be like the psycho moment with Norman Bates and Marion, and I can see that. But man, the dance scene just threw me. It's like once we get to that, then I'm like, okay, this is going to go into an area that I am not expecting. And it's like, I knew it was going to be dark, but now we just got a whole different, I don't know what this choreography is. Like, this is just some freaky ass shit now. And it's going to get real quick.
Well, and I feel like that's its purpose, right? Just to completely disorient you and be like, no, anything can happen here. And somehow these folks all know, like they all kind of take an unspoken cue as to now is the time to dance. And this is how we dance. Him saying, I loved you to him as he's sinking below. I mean, that is what every single character has asked of him the entire movie.
Yeah.
Is like, can you just say you love me? Can you just say you love me? Can you just say you love me? And finally he acquiesces. And you have to wonder, you know, what would it have been like had he been able to say that early on? You know, how might his life have been different had he been able to try to make that authentic connection instead of just saying, here's my performance and then I'm done.
Yeah. There's something about him, and we don't know his past, that got him to that point where he became this traveling artist. And we don't know what in his past has caused him to hang back from everyone. That might be just something that's innate, or it could have been formed through, you know, all his circumstance, or it could be some combination, likely. But we aren't granted that. We just see that he does withhold, and there are occasions where I think in the first couple instances where you know people tell him they love him, he might have reciprocated, and it could have been very, very normal and natural, and he chose not to, for whatever reason. And then I guess in a sort of catastrophic thinking sort of way, things get worse and worse. He's asked to, you know, reciprocate with a man who wants him to be his wife, you know, and then and then this whole crew of weirdos want him to join up, and it's really understandable. He doesn't want to hang with those guys. So it really only gets worse throughout the movie. And maybe it might not have, had he been open to anything early on. Not only does he not say I love you to people, but he gives nothing back.
Right.
No, it's just making me think, because as I'm listening to the conversation about that scene, it makes me, there's a few scenes that make it feel very otherworldly, like it doesn't feel like real life, and that's one of those scenes. And as we're talking about it, and AC mentioned that he acquiesces, and it made me think, oh, does he know he's gonna die? And so this is his, like, fuck it, whatever, sure. I don't know. It's a very weird and fascinating scene. Not that there's many not weird scenes in it. Yeah.
If anybody has any theories about who that other person is that's up on the cross out in the marsh, like as they're walking along, they come across that kind of desiccated corpse that's up there.
I figured it was the last Gloria that they got, but not the actual Gloria.
Yeah. Does this batch of people make everyone into that? You know, like maybe Mark didn't really have a chance. Like they were going, it didn't matter what he presents to others. They're going to try and force him to be a certain package that they want.
He tries to be polite. He tries to be civil. And on the one hand, you know, I think that's perfectly reasonable. When do you say enough's enough and, you know, stop playing nice, stop not listening to your gut, things like that?
Yeah, watching it this time, I was getting quite angry. And maybe because I knew where it was going to go, but also I think because I'm older, watching it now than the first time I watched it,
Right.
I think that niceness, don't be nice over being safe.
Right.
And so I think this time I just felt more pissed off, like, dude, come on.
There was the one moment when he got caught, his leg got caught in the trap, and the younger man who was looking for his dog, Boris, kneels beside him, and Mark, just getting frustrated that, you know, Boris isn't releasing him from this trap, bites him on the leg, but then immediately apologizes and asks him to come back and free him.
As Bartel is going through his glove compartment,
Right.
We see him go through some photos, and then there's an orange kind of like ticket that he opens up that is somebody else's picture and name, I believe. I feel like Fabrice du Welz, who wrote and directed, I feel like he's deliberately withholding as well. Like, I don't want to make this too easy for you. I want you to be able to lean in and make some choices for yourself as to what you think this is about.
Well, and that was a question I had, because I don't speak French, but when you bring up the part with the passport and the orange, I actually kind of think it was Mark, possibly, but maybe we don't know, since we don't ever really know his background. The way that picture looked, it looked like he was deranged and had like that.
He had the beard and everything.
He had a beard. He had that like hateful look in his eyes.
If anybody has any insights and just like, you dumb Americans, please put it in the comments and we'll be like, awesome, thank you. Kind of as you mentioned, John, it starts off with him putting on the makeup, which means we get kind of a mirror. You know, we see a reflection, but it's not the real identity. It's not the real person. We get the image that is presented, that is reflected, that we project.
When watching it this time, I was very fascinated that during that scene, he was communicating with that woman, like looking in the mirror. He wasn't really looking at her.
There's a sequence, I think it's kind of like when the alarm bells really go off, is when you see Bartel kind of like trying the van door. And then the next cut is him with a crowbar like jammed in. And you're like, oh, he doesn't care. He doesn't care if he gets caught. Mark's not going anywhere ever again.
Although he seems, there's a lot of sadness in this movie too. You know, I mean, from a lot of the characters, and that guy always struck me as very sad himself. He does terrible things, but they're born of like a real
pain.
Real pain going on with that guy.
If what he's saying is honest, and if his memories are accurate, which is very unclear to me with anyone who lives in that town, but you know, he experienced an enormous loss when Gloria left him, and it's something that he's always wanted to reattain, and he does through this insane means.
Did anyone else think that Gloria possibly populated that entire village with the age of all the younger gentlemen there?
My biggest question, this kind of ties into what you're saying in terms of like, how did this town become what it is? It's so perplexing, but something I didn't remember from my first viewing was that single shot of a large group of children all wearing identical red raincoats and red boots. Who were they?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I really to your question, Katie, I really had cause to wonder, like in a sort of Harold Pinter Homecoming sort of way, was she the woman in the town?
Yeah.
You know, that they took in and took from the innkeeper. Troubling to think about.
Because that's the other thing, like with that Brigadoon thing that I keep bringing up. It's like, one, the fact that they're definitely, all of the animals have female names, and then they're definitely doing things to the animals. It's like, why are there no other outside people able to come in, or, you know, stuff
why aren't
like
there
that?
No women in this town?
And no women whatsoever. Like, and the only person you ever hear about is Gloria.
It's got the air that any sort of female of any species is just used for sex.
Yeah.
Well, again, there to I mean, in a patriarchal society, I mean, that is the woman's role, is to fill to complete the male, ideal of life, and it isn't about that person having an identity.
Yeah.
And in that regard, anything will do. You need a singer, you need a cow, you need a pig, any of those things, as long as they complete what I'm looking for as a male, that's all I need.
I wanted to ask what your thoughts were regarding the very lengthy dancing scene. I mean, it's really like that goes on for quite a while. And I have my thoughts about what it tells me, but I'd like to, but those are only my thoughts, and I really need to get out of myself, and I'd like to hear other people's, like, what is that position in the film? What does that mean to you? How's that part of the storytelling? Because the lead is very distinctly absent for that whole chunk.
Right.
I think if I'm not mistaken, he witnesses the number of men with the pig, but in that dancing scene,
he's not there.
Present.
He's trapped at home. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's trapped
What is
back
that? What is that telling
end.
everyone?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I feel like those are two examples: the intercourse with the animal and the dancing, that are clearly ritualized. The ritualized bestiality, like, that is almost a kind and nurturing moment. Like, everybody is very kind to him in that moment. There's not a lot of like jeering or cheering or anything. It's like, this is part of becoming a man. This is part of the next step in your journey. So there was that aspect of it, again, that felt very ritualized. And then again, the dancing is so clearly a ritual. It is a thing we do. It felt like as you see where the film goes, it feels like a bit of a war dance. Like, this is us getting ramped up because we're going to go lay siege to the castle.
Or it's Tuesday night.
It's Tuesday night.
Right? It's possible,
get Bartell out of here, because it's time to dance.
The war dance, that's very interesting. That's one of the reasons I asked this question. It's like, I hadn't thought of it like that.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about either of those scenes, the bestiality or the dancing?
I agree with you with the war dance. I felt like, especially when the guy got to the piano, and considering that's one of the only interludes of music in the entire film.
That's right.
Which is so rare to have nothing but that. And then everyone's just like, and including the bartender, like because he gets away from the bar, and it's like they all pair up, and it's not like they're just dancing by themselves. They actually pair up to do this. So it's like, all right, this is what we do before we're going to go and get Gloria and take her from Bartell.
John, what are your thoughts on the dance?
So many different thoughts.
Other than awesome choreography, because obviously.
I did actually quite like the choreography, as simple and just primitive as it was. I definitely saw it as an extension of the film's homoeroticism, specifically because of what Katie spoke to about these men pairing together for the dance. It's ambiguous, of course. We don't know if it carries a sexual connotation for them or not. It's a very kind of confused sexuality, and that we're kind of observing in this film, that definitely kind of has a homoerotic flavor to it. As a brief side note, I'll say that as much as I love the New French Extremity movement, with its focus on just transgressive stories, very often homosexuality is kind of lumped in with more unsavory things. Sometimes it seems for shock value. And that aspect can be kind of a little disappointing in some of these films, including this one. And yet, it is absolutely fascinating. It's this mystery and puzzle of a film that I can't help but keep watching to kind of figure out what it means. And kind of speaking more to the dance, it definitely kind of gave me stereotypical rec room activity at the psychiatric care facility, which, again, if that's what it was trying to signal, maybe a little offensive. But
right.
To me, it was mainly an extension of the homoeroticism and madness that we were seeing in other aspects of the film, particularly in Bartell.
There's a bit of joy to it all. And that's the other thing I found interesting about the bestiality scene, is that it isn't done in a violent way. Like, it is done with tenderness, and the the war dance doesn't feel violent. It feels, if it's a war dance, you know, like you said, Dominic, it could be Tuesday night.
Did anyone get a feel of like Todd Browning's Freaks, like one of us, when they were dancing? Because I was getting that too. It's like one of us, one of us, and then going on to Let's Get Gloria.
I got a Charlie Brown feel.
I would so much rather hang out.
Charlie Brown, yeah, definitely Charlie Brown feel.
I would so much rather hang out with the freaks in Todd Browning's film than the people in this town and Calvaire. Oh my goodness.
Oh yes.
But all they want is for Mark to be one of them. You know, like they're inviting him in. He just doesn't want to. He doesn't want to join in.
To that end, I feel like from the dance we get their point of view a little bit. AC, you're kind of saying. Yeah, from the way they look at it is that it's erroneous and ugly what they do, but I thought that scene gave us a little bit of a peek into the ritual and that maybe it even humanizes them.
When they paired up, that was what humanized them for me. I was like, they are connecting with each other. You know, in a way that Mark doesn't. And I'm just now, as I'm moving my hands like this, I'm thinking, they mirror one another. You know, they play off of one another.
We see the workings. We see the workings of the cult. You know,
the community that it is.
The community of it. Yeah.
Like what's coming to mind and what I keep coming back to is that when they went to the inn, they retrieved the cow.
Yes.
The dog.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
They're so confused.
I got her. Should we go? And for some of them, at least, that was what they went for. Right. And then they found Gloria. So I wonder if the dance was just like a psych up, like, all right, we're going to go do our thing. I don't know, but it was a bizarro scene. And I think that's probably the highlight of the movie.
Something else I wonder is, given the confusion of Mark for Gloria and the confusion of a dog for a calf or whatever the animal was, like it was hard to see because those scenes were pretty dark. I mean, I wonder, like, do these people in this town have trouble distinguishing between humans and other animals?
Right.
I mean, they certainly have trouble distinguishing between people of different genders. I don't know. It's just kind of one of the many elements of confusion in the film that just makes me keep thinking about it.
Well, and that identity projection, right? I project onto you what I want you to be. I don't have any dogs. There's no dogs around here. Okay, you cow, you're my dog. And the cow has nothing to say about it because once I label you as such, that is my truth and you have nothing to say about it. And I feel like that is the same thing that is done with Mark. They say he is Gloria, and from there on out, he's Gloria to everybody in the community. I mean, he goes in and says, "This is my wife." And they're like, "How dare you threaten me? I'm going to go get this guy who's clearly not Gloria, but you said he was, so therefore."
I know I'm always cult fixated, but like talk about the rationale of all cults. We've made our decisions as a group, and that, as they say, is that. You know, we don't take in no other opinions are acceptable from here on.
There's no need for them, right?
Yeah. So this cow is a dog. And so forth, and everything else we want to be is what we say it is.
Yeah, it seemed like they were even making the pig a dog, that they had it on a harness and get the scent and go get him,
right,
or go get her.
True, yeah.
Playing the role of a dog. There is another kind of callback to Texas Chainsaw, and that's kind of the dinner scene, right, where Mark is having and Boris comes back with Bella, and you start seeing the camera spin, you know, and you get those close-ups of Mark. I like the fact that du Welz is clearly commenting on films that he loves and appreciates, but it doesn't, because the flavor feels so kind of weird and different, it doesn't inherently feel like he's just copying it.
Yeah.
I agree. One of my other favorite references, I have to believe it's an intentional reference, is that overhead shot inside
my gosh.
Yes.
Inside of Bartel's house. I mean, the first time I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is Taxi Driver right here, the climax of Taxi Driver.
Yep.
And it's equally stunning. And there's enough that's different about the scene that I do think helps it feel really fresh and earned in the film. Another shot, I don't know if it's referencing something in particular, but I love the dolly in through the windshield of
Yes.
Mark's van with kind of the disappearing windshield and ornament. I thought that was stunning. Like I want to say it evoked Hitchcock, but I can't think of a specific Hitchcock shot that did that. But it just kind of gave me that vibe. That's sort of showmanship.
My impression, John, is that they didn't have a lot of money, but it doesn't look cheap, this film. And they do get a lot of really great shots. It's not all just character and circumstance and acting and writing. They're really doing some, Fabrice du Welz is doing some great stuff.
Yeah, it is a gorgeously shot film. And that sequence you're talking about, John, at Bartel's, where it does that overhead crane, that's one of those moments where I go, never stop fighting. Because it's the clumsiest escape of all time, where he's just basically just stumbling over things, and people just kind of lose track of him, and he ends up getting all the way out and ultimately makes his escape. And I'm like, that's right. Anybody who's ever in a horror movie, just keep fighting, just keep heading for the door, and maybe you'll make it.
Was anyone else annoyed though by the way Bartel incapacitated Mark? It seemed like he was 6 feet away, and he's like, "Oh, you want the battery? You want the battery?" And then we're supposed to believe that he threw it to his head, and that Mark didn't dodge it or catch it, and then he was out. And I was like,
but who thinks they're going to get hit in the head with a battery?
I confess, not a trope. You're right. That is not a horror movie trope.
My guard would be down.
But it's a big, if it was a small battery, I could understand that better. It's like throwing it and hit it in the eye.
I felt like he kind of just whacked him with it, like a big sledgehammer.
That's what I thought too. But it is a confusing and disorienting moment.
Yes.
Maybe by design. I'm honestly not sure.
Yeah,
I agree. But again,
I was how is he? What? Okay, whatever.
Yeah,
and then the van just blows up.
Yeah, I kind of wondered if the knocking him out scene just didn't get filmed properly, and so they just chopped it up to the best they could, or if it was on purpose. But either way, it was a clunky moment, and I don't think that there was another clunky moment in the film like that part.
Well, and it's followed up with that beautiful shot of the flames of the van.
Yeah.
That van going up in flames is just gorgeous. I guess that probably redeemed the clunky battery. Hey, that was funny.
Well, the use in nature of in the marsh and the fog. I don't know how you shoot that effectively. Yeah. That's a real triumph to get that done, no matter how many millions of dollars you have or don't have.
Well, and Katie referenced it. It does feel, I think it was Katie, otherworldly. As he runs away, he runs into some mystical land that does not feel like it is of this earth anymore. It feels like something we didn't know existed. It feels like the misty fields of where.
It also seems somewhat biblical in certain moments.
Yeah,
it has that simplicity, and it also has that epic quality.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you said that, I thought fairy tale. There's a fairy tale quality to it, that it kind of transcends reality. Whereas Texas Chainsaw always feels nightmarish, but based in the world we know. This feels like it goes someplace else. It feels nightmarish that someplace else we don't know.
I hadn't thought about that, but they really do earn that jump into surrealism at the end. And I hadn't thought about how they really do get that and earn that by that point. But yeah, it's very realistic and pretty grounded before they get to that point. But I didn't challenge it when it got there.
No, and thank you for that word. Surrealism is that where it's going.
Yeah.
And there is still kind of a grittiness and griminess and messiness and ugliness to those final scenes at the same time, which is definitely a through line through the entire film.
This beautiful man that we met, putting on his makeup in the opening moments, what we are left with at the end is someone who's been robbed of all of that. He's been robbed of his clothes, robbed of his hair, robbed of his identity, and literally crucified.
As I said, I felt like he was able to walk through the marsh without any, but then the person behind him immediately sunk. Yeah. And I'm like that. I thought that was very interesting. Also, that did not look warm. The whole film is, you go from, it's very bare. Obviously it's winter and Christmas time as they point out, because it's a Christmas movie, everybody. And then to go like he's walking through water, which is and the mud, and then the marsh, and then that's even more like the snow and that. And I was like, oh my gosh, just the elements alone. I'm like, I'm dying. But I think, plus, I let's be honest, I don't think Mark would have lasted very long because he lost a lot of blood.
Yeah. I think that was, to me, like very much the cherry on top of like a really unsettling movie is Mark goes into the river in his clothing and in his jacket. And if you've ever been cold and wet, like, you know how shitty that is. And then he's still just trying to get away. And then when it ends, it's just the sound of wind. And how awful that felt to, there's no images left. It's just credits. But all I hear is this. It was, even just thinking about it now, like I'm getting goosebumps. Like, that sucks.
Me too, actually.
Until you said that just now, I just thought like The Revenant's sort of an example of that. You know, the story is over, and it ends with the protagonist still in a perilous position. He's probably going to die. And actually, he's probably going to suffer some more before he dies. You know, but you don't know.
It's like I've said, it's French extreme. No one wins. Even if you survive, nobody wins.
So, well, I had just a few extra thoughts to bring up. When I did that deep dive into new French extremity films, I noticed that so many of them are Christmas movies like Calvaire.
Inside too. Different
people kind of include different films or exclude different films from the movement of new French extremity. But I was thinking about Man Bites Dog, Dead End, Chiton, and like Katie said, Inside, and also P2, which is, I think, a super horror film. Yeah, all of them by French directors. If you wanted to, you could even go as far back as Faceless from 1988, which also has Brigitte Lahaie in it.
Yes, it does. And thank you for name checking her, because Aaron Abouchon was supposed to be on this show, and I was just waiting for him because he's a big Jean Roland fan. I was like waiting for him to name check Brigitte Lahaie. This film, again, kind of gets lumped in with those, and it brought a lot of attention to Fabrice du Welz. His other films have not enjoyed the same kind of visibility, at least on this side of the Atlantic. He did a film called Vignon. He did one called Alleluia, which brought back Laurent Lucas. He's a really terrific filmmaker, and somebody, a lot of his films are on Shudder. So I recommend folks to kind of seek him out and look for his works there. But John, Man Bites Dog, another Belgian film, and one of my absolute favorites when it comes to, like, we talk about found footage. I'm kind of like, this is one of the early found footage films, and they were taking it and running with it.
It is so brilliant. It's very possibly my favorite mockumentary film, ranked even higher than anything by Christopher Guest, although it might be a close tie with some Christopher Guest movies.
A very different flavor, to be sure.
Yeah. Just warning, Man Bites Dog is also one of the most disturbing films you could ever see.
Yep.
And somehow manages to be like truly hilariously funny in some moments and like utterly devastating in other moments.
Yeah, that is one that feels like just a descent, where you start off having a good time, and then you're like, how did I get here? Looking at the depravity of humanity.
Yeah, it's basically documentarians following a serial killer about his everyday life.
Highly recommended.
Yeah.
And just circling back to that French extreme, Phillipe Nahon, who plays the other antagonist, the one that chases him into the marsh and sinks, he is probably best known to viewers from High Tension. He plays the killer who's driving the truck.
No shit.
Okay.
Yep, without a beard.
Yeah, I didn't recognize him.
Yeah, he's also in Gaspar Noé's I Stand Alone.
Is he? Okay.
Brotherhood of the Wolf. He's a very distinguished French actor, and as you see, just has a lot of power with these kind of bizarre characters.
Oh, I did not make that connection that he was in I Stand Alone. All right.
Yeah. And you see him at the very beginning of Irreversible, because we go from I Stand Alone into the story that is Irreversible. So he's got a cameo as such as it is in that. And Laurent Lucas, a couple of other genre efforts that he's done are A Friend Like Harry, In My Skin, Alleluia, the remake of Mario Bava's Rabid Dogs, and the recent cannibal film that Julia Ducournau did, Raw. He plays the father in that.
I didn't recognize him from that. Okay.
Well, it was a while ago. I mean, this is 20. We're looking at 20 years back.
Sure.
But yeah, he's wonderful, and I love the fact that he's willing to do genre stuff and then go off and do some prestige stuff and then come back around.
I just wanted to ask, because we were talking a bit before about some comedy stuff. Some of the stuff I saw online described Calvaire as a dark comedy. I didn't get that vibe at all. I'm wondering if anyone else did.
I mean, it's outlandish in its way, but
like uncomfortable laughing. But I wouldn't be like,
Yeah, I was like, am I just American and I don't get it? It could be, but I didn't get that.
There were a few moments on repeat viewing with Bartel that I thought to myself were somewhat humorous. I was never laughing out loud during this film, though. Like, especially upon repeat viewing when I know all the horrors that are about to unfold.
There's certainly, especially on repeat viewings, as you said, John, where you recognize the direness of the situation, and you might have an uncomfortable laugh as a release. But I think this film plays it pretty straight. Fabrice du Welz is trying to tell a tense and dangerous story, one that's uncomfortable and discomforting and throws you off balance.
I think the comedy version of Calvaire is Chiton, which came out just a couple years later, with Vincent Cassel playing multiple characters. And I'm not going to say anything more than that because I don't want to spoil too many details. But that too is about an incestuous community and people who actually go there to stay because they're friends with the daughter of somebody who still has a farm there. And it also has bestiality. I mean, it's a truly horrific and disturbing film, but definitely plays it more for laughs than Calvaire does.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. The only time that I would have laughed in Calvaire is when Bartel tells the joke about the
foosball players escaping.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only time that I think I actually laughed, even not that much. But yeah, man, if someone's calling this a dark comedy, that's an eyebrow. That's an eyebrow for me right there. I'm going to tell you.
Well, I will say I actually wrote down a line that did make me laugh, and that's when Bartel tells Mark not to go to the village. They're not performers, like they're not like us,
Aww.
And I was like, oh yeah, that's true. That's true. They're not like you, but they kind of are.
Another thing, that moment to me, especially on repeat viewing, there is the stereotype that queer people are more creative people. And I wondered if he was trying to signal in that moment in some conscious or unconscious way, we're not like the other people in town.
Sure.
We might share a special bond here. I don't know. There's a lot in the dialogue and just in the interactions between the characters, particularly with Bartel and Mark. Yeah, there is kind of a queer undercurrent there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why I was really looking forward to this conversation, is I feel like it isn't just a lot of weird for weird's sake. The film is inviting you to interpret. You can just enjoy the weird for weird's sake and the gore, but you can also, I think, kind of dig in. He's given you enough meat to chew on.
You were kind of mentioning this before, AC, that you could watch it multiple times and still kind of see a different movie every time.
Yeah. And I kind of forget how brilliant it is, even though I know it's brilliant. As I'm watching these scenes and how they're composed and how they're edited together, I'm just like, man, this is so good. And this was his feature debut. This was him coming out of the gate going, here's what I can do.
I didn't realize, looking at just IMDbing it, I don't know what it made in Europe, but the fact that its opening weekend in the US was only $890.
Oh, no.
And then the worldwide gross was $32.60. I'm shocked that it's even that all of us have seen it, that it's on Shudder. I mean, I'm glad. I think with the numbers now, any film that would have made that much money now, it's like no one's going to see it. So I'm just so glad that despite that, like, people didn't, like, it's not about the numbers, it's about the quality of the film.
Yeah.
And, you know, the story that we're able to watch it. So hope that continues.
I hope so too. And I definitely like to believe it's the quality of the film that has given it stay power, and that has kind of built an audience over time. I do think a part of it too, though, is, to kind of put it in simple terms, the shock value of the film. Like, it is such a deeply disturbing film. Any film like that is often is more likely to kind of gather an audience because people want to see what all of the fuss is about. Just hearing about how deeply disturbing it is, that can be really enticing to some people.
But it's also not going to be the thing that's going to be appealing to a general populace. You know, it's not something you're going to just invite anybody to see. It has to be somebody who's willing to be challenged on different levels.
You could lose some friends. Renting this movie on a Friday night with some people, you could lose those friends. Yeah.
And speaking to that point, Ashley, did you ever go on another date with that person who selected that movie for your date night?
Yeah, we dated for 2.5 years. So.
Oh, wow. Nice.
As this conversation is wrapping up, it's a really good point that this is a really good film, but it is not enjoyable. It is really uncomfortable from start to finish. And so I'm, Katie, like you're saying, like, it's kind of surprising that it's got this life, but I think there really is something special about it. Mm-hmm. But for anyone who might be listening to this or watching this who hasn't seen it, like, you're not going to have fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a very typical French extreme. I mean, you know, these are not movies that it's like, these are actually movies that's like, I want to go visit an animal shelter and see some puppies now, just to get, you know, because it sort of atrophies your soul. And it's like, I just want to get a little piece of that back. So I'm going to call my grandma, or, you know, let's go see some babies because I feel like I lost a part of me.
Yep.
For me, the fun, if you can call it that, is just watching the craft on display and seeing things that I've never seen before. Like, I've never seen anything like that dance hall sequence before. And I love it when an artist can surprise me in that way. So yes, I'll be smiling because I'm imagining already telling people about it, people that I think would vibe with it. But yeah, I think your general horror fan might be a little nonplussed by it, and that's okay. You know, I hope if you are nonplussed by it, I hope you come back around to it at some point and try it on again. John, what are some final thoughts from you?
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, firstly, it was just really lovely to talk with you all about this film. I love all of your insights. You made me think about the film in new ways. And, you know, I hope that folks listening in who haven't seen the film yet do check it out. And I guess to share one more thought, kind of, you know, building on this idea that I was speaking to earlier, that there is a little bit of a borderline homophobia streak in the new French Extremity. Yeah. If you want an example of the new French Extremity that doesn't contain that, I would recommend Martyrs. It's probably my favorite of the new French Extremity films. And the lesbian tension between the two lead characters is something that the film really values and celebrates. So,
yeah, great. Thank you, John. Katie?
I personally was, you know, with the French Extremity, I was late to seeing a number of them, but I think it's a very important genre of film in that early millennium that people should see. I wish things that were done that are just not done anymore, that, I mean, it was just balls to the wall. Just, there was no fear or thought of like, you know what, we're going to do this and we're just going to do it. This, I feel like, is one of those films, you know, if you haven't seen Calvaire or Inside or even Them, those are all those movies that it's like, wow, this is something, and it definitely is a discussion. And that's why we're here with this. So check it out. It's on Shudder. And, you know, see what you think. Just don't hate us afterwards.
Dominic?
Part of me was hoping that before this conversation that the film would be solved for me. But now after this conversation, I think I'm really happy that it hasn't been solved. and then I'll keep on thinking about it. And that's probably one of the great triumphs of the film, full stop.
Ashley?
I agree with everything everyone is saying. And for people who haven't seen it, it's very much worth the watch. And as uncomfortable as it is, it's not going to, go for 2.5 hours. You're going to get through it and you're going to have fun. And well, you're not going to have fun, but hopefully you have more fun talking about it afterward. Because this was a great conversation. I really appreciate you all. Thank you.
Also, if you haven't seen it, you've been listening to us for an hour. You're a special breed of human, and I appreciate you. But also, hopefully, after you've seen the movie, come back around and enjoy the conversation. Because I love hearing other people's views on this film, especially when it's not straightforward. So appreciate all of your insights, enthusiasm, and for joining us on this most unholiday of holiday movies. Looking forward to having you all on again very soon. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.
Happy holidays.